All right. This gentleman right here.
My name's Dan Padilla. I'm the principal at Los Lunas High School.
Well, it's great to see you.
And thank you, sir.
Now, has somebody given you a pass
yes,
to be off campus?
And yes,
Okay.
they do. As a matter of fact,
All right.
I'm really proud. Etta is my counselor at my high school. So thank you all and welcome to New Mexico.
Thank you.
This statement, I promise my students every day, my students are my mission every day. And what they think and what they do is important to all of us. And I have a statement from Miss Valerie May's AP class. And it could be a statement and a question from any high school group of students. And it says, welcome, President Obama, to New Mexico. And it says, we are all concerned and sometimes scared that there will be no money for us to continue our education. While we seem to be the target and the gauge on how much money our school and state gets, what assurance will we have that we will be rewarded for good work? There seems to be less monies that banks lend our families, and most of all, no jobs. We want to thank you for listening to us. Thank you for all you do for our country. We know that you are only one man, and we must all believe, have faith, and support you in your endeavors.
Well, thank you so much. That's a wonderful letter, and I think it's part of what makes me so optimistic about the country. When you actually travel and meet young people around the country, they'll make you optimistic. I mean, they're smart and they're ambitious and they want to help their community and they've got good values and they've got good common sense. But they are anxious right now, which is understandable. I mean, they're growing up in the shadow of a financial crisis that we hadn't seen in our lifetimes unless you were born in 1910, 1915. You wouldn't remember a crisis like this having happened. And so they're seeing it firsthand, and they're seeing it in their families. I'm sure even though their parents are trying to hide their stress from them, if business is bad, if you're having trouble paying the bills, kids hear that. They know it. And, some of the letters that are most heartbreaking for me when I get a group of letters every night that I read from people all across the country. It's selected from the 40,000 emails and letters that we get. And sometimes it's letters from children, and they'll write to you about, my dad lost his job, and he just doesn't seem the same, and, is there something you can do? And it's heartbreaking. They absorb all the pain that is going on out here right now. But that is why it is so important for us to make sure that we are meeting our commitments to them, not just individually as parents, but also as a society. So when we increase student aid so that these young people that just wrote to me are able to afford going to college, and you've then got the other side in this election pledging to reverse those increases so that they're less likely to be able to afford going to college, that should motivate you at the voting booth in terms of what your priorities are. When we're talking about here's a good example, and the congressman will remember this. We had a debate in Washington because states were very hard strapped for cash and were starting to lay off teachers. And we said, let's close a corporate tax loophole that is incentivizing companies to ship jobs overseas. Let's close that loophole and use that money to help states keep teachers and firefighters and cops on the job. Because there are a bunch of states, Hawaii actually had gone to a 4-day-a-week school week because they just couldn't afford teachers. Think about that. 4 days a week you go to school, they're missing a fifth of the school year because of budget crunches. And so we said, well, that's not acceptable. Let's just close this tax loophole that even the companies that were using the loophole couldn't really defend. So we closed it. The leader of the Republicans in the House, he fought us tooth and nail to do that. And then when we pointed out this is saving a whole bunch of teacher jobs and police officer jobs and firefighter jobs, he says, well, those are just government jobs. Just government jobs. Well, these are people who are teaching our kids. These are folks who are rushing into burning buildings to save our families, putting their lives on the line. Government jobs? But that is the ideology that the other side has been bringing to every problem out here for years now. And that's the choice that we've got in this election. So, look, those young people, they're going to succeed. But we've got to make sure that we make it easier for them as opposed to harder for them to succeed. Ultimately what's going to bring about their success is their determination and their talents and their pluck and their willingness to stick to it. But, we can give them a hand up. We can make sure the college is affordable. We can make sure that, they're able to stay on their parents' health insurance till they're 26 if the first job they get out of school doesn't have health insurance. We can make sure that they're not cheated the first time they buy their home, because now we've got a consumer finance protection agency that's going to monitor mortgage brokers and bank practices so that people don't have to get tricked because of fine print. These are just basic things that we can do. If they decide they want to open a business, we can make sure that they can get some financing and that they don't have to pay capital gains on their startup business. These little things add up to big things. It means that they can focus their energy on their dreams and their vision and what they're trying to build, and not spend all their time constantly just worrying about, am I going to be able to go to school or not? That should be a given in this country, because it's good for all of us, not just for these young people individually. Okay? How are we doing on time? I want to make sure that I'm not. What last question? I've got to. You're going to refer to him? Okay, you're going to defer to him. Well, he is a good-looking young man. I got to admit. You wanted to hear from him. I understand. All right, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. My name is Andrew Cavalier. I'm his son. Got a couple questions for you. One really hits hard for me. Getting a little emotional here. My father, being a veteran, we appreciate everything that he's done for the country. And, obviously the VA does a lot for my father.
Yeah, we love your dad. Yeah, we appreciate what he's done.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
The reason I get emotional is because, well, unfortunately, at the VA sometimes, he doesn't get the care and the service that he should.
Right.
He sacrificed his body. Over 17 surgeries that he's had.
Right.
I really didn't want to do this on TV.
That's all right.
But, I see it. He put his blood, his sweat, and his tears into this country, and doesn't always get the type of, care that he deserves. Because, and I just want to ask, do you have any plan for that? There's obviously lots of veterans out there.
Right.
Feel the same way, not getting the treatments that they deserve. It's not just the medications, it's really being treated like a human.
Right.
And that's kind of the issue that I have is, we put in our taxpayer dollars, and, I have a small business myself. We help provide people with, legal services, stuff like that, having access to their rights. But when you can't afford it, we're forced to, just basically, settle for what we got because of the fact that that's all we could afford.
Well, let me, first of all, you don't have to apologize for being emotional about your dad who served our country as a Marine, man. That's, I get emotional when I think about our young men and women and our veterans who have served this country with such bravery and courage. We have a sacred trust for people who put on the uniform of the United States. They serve us. They're willing to put their lives on the line. And that means that when they come back, we've got to serve them. Now, here's the good news. First of all, I've got what I think is one of the finest, if not the finest, secretaries of Veterans Affairs ever, General Rick Shinseki, who himself is a disabled veteran. And this guy just thinks day and night about how are we going to make sure that veteran services are provided in a timely, effective, respectful fashion. All right, so that's point number one. Point number two, we actually, even in the midst of this very difficult budget situation that we're in, we have increased over the last 2 years funding for veterans more than any time in the last 30 years. More than any time in the last 30 years. And the reason we did it was because a lot of VA facilities had gotten outdated. The backlog in terms of folks trying to get medical services or getting their claims processed had just gotten ridiculous. You had over 1 million young people who had served in Iraq and now Afghanistan who had come back, and they've got new problems like, well, they're not new problems, but now we're much more effective at diagnosing post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury. They weren't getting services. We've got women who are now serving in a much more dangerous situation in a lot of these theaters, and yet a lot of VA facilities still did not have special services for women and their special needs as they return. So we are in the process of investing more in the VA and reforming how business is done at the VA than at any time in the last 30 years. Now, we've still got a ways to go, but this is, again, an example of where, come November, we've got to start making some choices. Because if, for example, we give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires that cost us $700 billion that we don't have, that money has to come from somewhere. And, we've got to be able to provide for our veterans. I'd rather choose veterans. I'd rather choose these young people who are looking for scholarships. Homeless veterans. I mean, the notion that we've got somebody who served our country and they're now on the streets, they don't have a house. So we've said we're going to have zero tolerance for homeless veterans. We are going to do everything we can to make sure that every single person who has served our country, that they've got proper medical care and they've got a roof over their heads. And oftentimes that means counseling. And the irony is if you make the investments early, then it turns out that they're less expensive over the long term. So this is something that you're right to be emotional about. And I think we should all be emotional about it. And we're grateful to your dad for his service. And we just need to remind ourselves that there are